Picture this. It's January 15th, 1919, in the north end of Boston. It's an unseasonably warm winter day. People are out enjoying the mild weather, going about their business. Horse-drawn carts clatter down the streets, and children are playing. It seems like a perfectly normal day. But in the shadow of a colossal, 5-story tall steel tank, a disaster of truly bizarre proportions is about to unfold. This wasn't just any tank. It held 2.3 million gallons of crude molasses, a thick, sticky, brown syrup. Owned by the Purity Distilling Company, a subsidiary of U.S. Industrial Alcohol. This molasses was destined to be fermented into industrial alcohol, a key ingredient for munitions during World War I. The war had just ended, but the demand was still there. The tank itself was a ticking time bomb. Residents had been complaining for years. It groaned and shuddered under the immense weight of its contents. Dark, sticky molasses constantly oozed from its seams, and local kids would collect the sweet drippings on sticks as a treat. The company knew the tank was faulty, but instead of fixing it, they just painted it brown to hide the leaks. A classic case of out of sight, out of sight. Around 12:30 in the afternoon, without any warning, the tank didn't just leak, it exploded. Eyewitnesses reported hearing a sound like a machine gun as the rivets shot out of the steel plates, followed by a deep, terrifying rumble. The metal walls of the tank ripped apart, and in an instant, 2.3 million gallons of molasses were unleashed. This wasn't a slow leak. It was a catastrophic failure. A monstrous dark brown wave, estimated to be up to 40 feet high at its peak, burst forth. It moved with terrifying speed, surging through the streets at an estimated 35 miles per hour. This wasn't just a flood of water. This was a thick, viscous tsunami of goo. It had the density and momentum of a freight train, but it behaved like a liquid, flowing into every crack and crevice. The initial force of the wave was apocalyptic. It slammed into the neighboring buildings with enough power to rip them clean off their foundations. A nearby firehouse was completely flattened, crushing several firefighters inside. The sheer pressure of the molasses buckled the steel supports of the elevated railway track, sending a train car dangling precariously over the edge. People in its path had no time to react. The wave picked up debris as it went, splintered wood, bricks, and even horse-drawn wagons, turning the sticky flood into a deadly battering ram. 21 people lost their lives that day. Some were crushed by the initial impact or by the debris the wave carried. Others, caught in the flow, were unable to escape the thick, suffocating syrup and drowned. 150 more were injured, trapped in a sticky, inescapable nightmare. The accounts from survivors are horrifying. People and animals were trapped almost instantly. The molasses was so thick that once you were caught, it was nearly impossible to move. It acted like quicksand. The more you struggled, the deeper you sank. Horses were particularly tragic victims. Many were stuck standing upright, completely immobilized by the gooey mess. Rescuers tried desperately to free them, but the molasses held them fast. In the end, many of the poor animals had to be put down right where they stood, unable to be saved. Imagine the scene. A city street transformed into a deep brown sticky swamp, with the tops of wagons and the heads of struggling animals barely visible. The air was thick with the sweet, sickening smell of molasses and the sounds of chaos and desperation. When the wave finally lost its momentum, it left a coating of molasses 2 to 3 feet deep across several city blocks. And now, the second phase of the disaster began, the cleanup. It was an epic, almost comical task, if it weren't so grim. Hundreds of sailors, police officers, and civilian volunteers were called in. They shoveled for weeks in the cold Boston weather. But how do you clean up molasses? They tried using fire hoses, but spraying cold water on the cold, thick syrup only made it harder to move. They eventually discovered that salt water from the harbor helped break it down, so they pumped seawater onto the streets. The entire Boston harbor turned brown for months as the molasses was slowly washed away. And then there was the smell. For decades after the flood, on hot summer days, residents of the North End swore they could still smell the sweet, phantom scent of molasses lingering in the air. People reported smelling it well into the 80s. The disaster became a permanent part of the city's sensory memory, a strange and sweet reminder of a dark day. So, what caused this bizarre catastrophe? The company, U.S. Industrial Alcohol, immediately tried to shift the blame. Their first story: it was blown up by anarchists. This was the era of the Red Scare, so it was a convenient excuse. But the truth was far less dramatic and much more predictable. Corporate negligence. The tank was rushed into construction without proper testing. The steel was too thin, and it wasn't strong enough to hold the immense pressure of 2.3 million gallons of molasses. The company had skipped basic safety checks, like filling it with water first, to test for leaks. The unseasonably warm weather on January 15th was the final nail in the coffin. The cold molasses in the tank, warmed by the outside air, began to expand and ferment, producing carbon dioxide gas. This increased the pressure inside the already straining tank until it finally, catastrophically failed. The aftermath of the Great Molasses Flood led to one of the first and most significant class action lawsuits in Massachusetts history. For 6 years, the courts heard testimony from over 1,000 witnesses. In the end, the company was found liable for its shoddy engineering and disregard for public safety. They were ordered to pay out a settlement of over $600,000, the equivalent of about $11 million today, to the families of the victims. But the legacy of the flood goes far beyond the financial settlement. This strange, sticky disaster had a profound impact on American history. It led to sweeping changes in construction regulations and engineering standards across the United States. From then on, all new industrial structures, especially tanks, had to be certified by a qualified engineer, and their blueprints had to be signed and filed with the city. The deaths in Boston ensured that a tragedy like this would never happen again. So, the next time you pour some molasses on your pancakes, remember the story of the Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919. It's a bizarre, tragic, and ultimately transformative event that proves truth can often be stranger and stickier than fiction. It's a powerful reminder that cutting corners on safety can have devastating consequences, and that even a wave of something as seemingly harmless as molasses can become a force of unimaginable destruction. Thanks for watching, and if you found this story as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into the strangest corners of history. See you next time.